Well, as I was thinking about our time together, I actually would love to start with just a little devotional. I just feel like I'll put something in my heart for you guys. Is that cool?
Yeah,
Sweet. Right.
break out, break out the swords. All
Let's
right,
do it.
cool.
Let's do it. Okay, so I'm gonna do a share screen so you can actually read along. I've just there was a scripture that got put on my heart this morning. Okay, and so this is where my Zoom window is being challenging. There we go. All the things trying to get it to work just right.
What's the verse?
Share. John 21. Sweet. Are you seeing a picture right now?
I'm seeing a picture of a
Yep.
console. Oh, there it is in the
There it is.
middle. Super
Awesome.
tiny, but maybe if a computer could see it.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yes, so John 21, this is where Jesus reveals himself to the disciples at the Sea of Galilee. And so it says he did it in this way. um, so Simon Peter said to all the other guys, I'm going to go fishing. And they said, okay, we're going with you. And so they went out and they got in the boat. And that night they caught absolutely nothing. So I'm sure you're familiar with this story. So verse 4 says, as morning was breaking, Jesus came and stood on the beach. However, the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish to eat along with your bread? And they answered, no. And so he said to them, cast the net on the right hand side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast the net, and then they were not able to haul it in because of the great catch of fish. I love that. Like, it's like they've been toiling all night and gotten nowhere. And now suddenly it's like, boop, and the net is full because they followed God's command and his encouragement to try again.
Mm, awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
So then that disciple, John, whom Jesus loved, said to Peter, is it the Lord? And so when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer tunic and he threw himself into the sea and he swam ashore. But the other disciples came in the small boat, for they weren't far from the shore. They were only 100 yards away, dragging the net full of fish. And so when they got to the beach, they saw a charcoal fire set up and fish cooking and bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you've just caught. And so Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net to land. And it was full of all these large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. And none of the disciples even dared to ask, who are you? Because they knew without a doubt that it was the Lord. And so Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. And this is now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he had risen from the dead. And so when they'd finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than the others do? With total commitment and devotion, it says in the Amplified Version, right? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my lambs. And again, he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And then Jesus said to him, shepherd my sheep. And he said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And then Peter was grieved that he asked the third time. And he said, do you really love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything, and you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. And so the idea of like having to have faith when you're doing everything you know in your own skill set and nothing results from it. It's literally empty results. You don't see one single fish caught in the net from doing what you know to do. You're a fisherman and you know to go fishing. And how frustrating that must have been for the disciples to just feel like, I know how to fish. I've been doing this my whole life, and to come up with nothing. But then to have Jesus from the shore just say, like, I just try the other side of the boat, right? Let's just try that side. And that had to have felt so just like, it's not gonna work, Jesus. Like, probably they almost did it to like humor him, like, okay, fine, let's try. And I would just like can only imagine like their shock and laughter and like, what the heck? Like, why did this work? Like, what's the deal, right? And I just think it's a beautiful thing though, that it's like then they were able to catch this whole giant net of fish. And then Jesus does this whole talk on like, okay, so feed my sheep. And that basically by him instructing them how to catch fish, they have tons of fish to feed people. And so I feel like it's like when God directs us to do things, even though it might seem silly at times, you might be like, I don't even know, like I've tried this before or whatever, but it's when it's him directing, we'll see him then like compound our efforts. There's this like compound effect. And then in turn, our obedience plus God's compound effect equals having nets so full that it's like super easy to feed the sheep what he provides for us, right? It's like the story of the loaves and fishes, the little boy who came while he was, and ended up using it to feed the 5,000. This little boy only had some loaves and fishes, but he offered his gifts and probably felt a little silly about it. But then God compounded it to feed people. And so I just feel like I wanted to invite you to do a journaling exercise this weekend and maybe make a reminder in your phone right now, or put it on a post-it or whatever you got to do, but write down this question and then wait and see what God says and write down what you hear. So, God, are you asking me to cast my net on the other side of the boat today?
Okay.
And take a few moments to journal about some of the things that like you're feeling, right? Tap into the feelings. Maybe you are so frustrated, you feel defeated in some areas. Maybe there's been discouragement, things that you guys tried. I know even in just the interviews that I got to do with you, that a lot of you, it's like you know how to write songs and like, but you're frustrated and you feel like you've been trying and getting like an empty net. And then spend a few moments asking God if he's asking you to leave all of that behind that you've known and to cast your net on the other side. Even if it seems futile or impossible and like nothing's going to change at all. And tap into that feeling of like envisioning those disciples with all those fish flopping in the nets and those feelings of hope and faith, and let that feeling rise up in your heart, and journal about your dreams. And journal about the things that you feel like could be possible if God was to fill your net to overflowing. Like, what would that life look like for you if he filled your net to overflowing in those areas where you've been feeling it's been empty? And experience for a moment, even just in your mind's eye, like what that would feel like if you were obedient to his call from the shore to just like turn around to the other side of the boat and try once more. So
cool. Way cool.
Oh, right on. Well, I just wanted to welcome Christine popped in. Hey, Christine, it's good to have you here. You're welcome to just listen in, or feel free to pop in on video if you want to as well. So,
thank you.
Hey, girl. I know she's got little ones around, so she mentioned she, would have a hectic morning, but thanks for tuning in. So let me just pray for our time, and then we're going to dive in and get to some more songwriting specific stuff here. But I just felt like I wanted to encourage you guys today to not be discouraged if your net's been feeling empty, and that there is hope. And I really feel like he wants to like overwhelm you. I get emotional. Like, he wants to like overwhelm you with the ability that he has to fill your net. And I've seen that happen in my life over and over again. And I really feel like God wants that for you guys. So let's pray. Lord, I just thank you for this crew. I thank you for Rachel and Elizabeth and Josh and Christine. And I thank you for those who are going to watch the replay later. God, I pray that you would bless them as they're watching, that you would encourage them, God, where there may be discouragement, where they're feeling defeated, maybe where they just don't know what steps to take next. God, each of these beautiful men and women and songwriters have a heart to write songs to impact the world, to draw people closer to your heart. And I pray, Jesus, that you would help encourage them today, God, that you are the God who fills empty nets. And so I pray that you would just give them courage to maybe cast the net again and to trust that they could get a different result, Lord, as you direct them. And so we just lean into what you have for them today and ask for you to meet us in this moment. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
Sweet. Okay, so one part of the small process one small part of the big process we're gonna talk about today is when you get to the place where you're writing songs and releasing them, you need to register with a performing rights organization. And in the US, there's two main ones, which is ASCAP, ASCAP, which stands for the American Society of Composers and Publishers. And then there's BMI, which I should know what that stands for. Something Music International. I forget what the B stands for, actually. It's so funny. We just say ASCAP and BMI, and I don't even know what they stand for half the time. But anyways, it's the way that you're able to set yourself up as a professional writer. And then that's how you are able to start accruing royalties from anything that you have released out into the world. What some songwriters don't know is if you don't have a publisher of, like, if some record label didn't sign you, a publishing company bought your songs, you are your own publisher, period. So you become your own publishing company. The funny part of that process is, that seems kind of silly, is that you actually have to choose a publishing company name for yourself. So like to register with ASCAP or BMI, you have to register as both a writer and a publisher, and you have to choose a unique name. So there's a process to it that it's like, you can't just, there might already be a Susie Smith Music or, whatever. So they literally say, like, you can't use that name that's already been taken. You need a unique publishing name. So about 15 years ago, it was right after my husband had walked out on me. I was facing divorce. I was facing bankruptcy. I'd lost my husband. I'd lost my job. I was working at the church. Like, this, just like everything was tanking. And all I knew to do was write songs and sing. And like, so I had been like signed to a Christian label for most of my 20s, which I think I shared with a lot of you on our interview calls, and like spent a lot of my younger years touring and having, the publishing company I was with, Vineyard Worship at the time, they were handling all of the admin. They were handling all of those things, right? And so I had to learn how to do all of that myself. And so I had no idea what I was doing, but I was just like following the steps. So I knew I wanted to choose a name that was meaningful. And so God used that story in the Bible that I shared this morning to inspire my publishing company name. And God talked to me about casting the net on the other side of the boat, because I had felt like everything that I had been working towards and everything that I knew was just like an empty net. And like, I felt like there was nothing for me there anymore. And I felt like God was like, you have to trust me and cast the net on the other side. And we can do this independent artist thing. Like, I have a call on your life, and all the things that have happened are not going to stop that call on your life. And so I want to go back to this slide that with that verse, and where it says starboard right here in the middle, cast the net on the right hand side of the boat. So in nautical terms, the right side of the boat is the starboard side, the left side of the boat is the port side. So I've actually kind of like been curious and have read a few like commentaries on if there's like symbolism to the starboard side. Some people talk about maybe the right hand of the Father or whatever, there's different theories on what that might have meant. That wasn't even that as important to me. It's just that I felt like God using it as a symbol for me. And so there was something about that starboard phrase meant something to me. And so I decided I would use that as part of my publishing company name. And, being the starboard side of the boat, I had God like whisper to my heart to look up the definition of stride. And I was like, well, that's weird. But I was like, okay. And so I literally started to look it up again the other day, because I was like, I want to look at that definition again and remind myself what this whole situation was. And so stride, the definitions are to walk with long, decisive steps in a specific direction, to cross an obstacle with one long step, or a long decisive step, or a step or stage in progress towards an aim, which I really liked that one. And I love stepping over an obstacle, because I felt like I had so many roadblocks in my way, and I felt pretty aimless and I felt pretty lost. But I felt like God was calling me to do an about face and like cast my net on the other side and step over the obstacles in my way and make a decisive step in a new direction and progress with an aim, with intention. And it propelled my whole music and ministry career for the next 15 years. And so I started my little publishing company, Starboard Stride. And, I've been able to, be a one-woman business. Pretty much handled everything on my own. Most of the producers and studio time that I booked to record my albums in the last 15 years were crowdfunded. with platforms like Kickstarter, GoFundMe, or good old fashioned like pre-sales, just going to friends and family and saying like, hey, I'm working on this album. Would you be willing to pre-order, an album for 15 bucks, even if it's a digital delivery? You could deliver them a digital download of the album when it's done, right? So get people like to give 10 bucks, 15 bucks, whatever, or say like, would you, whatever. A lot of times people end up giving you 50 bucks, right? They're like, yeah, sure. I'd love to donate. You make it a donation process or whatever. So there's lots of ways. If you feel stunted about finances, you need to remember that God is the God who fills empty nets. And you need to get out of that scarcity mindset of there's no money. There is money and God does want to provide for you, but sometimes you have to invite other people into what God's doing with you so they can be a part of the journey with you. So
You should say that word again. You should say that word again, scarcity. People don't know what that word is.
yeah, if you're living in that space of there's never enough, if you're living in that space of like, I'm broke, I don't have any money. I was bankrupt. I was living in a friend's basement, literally. They like made a bedroom for me in their basement. I started like teaching piano lessons at a private studio because I didn't have a job. Like like everything tanked when my divorce happened. It tanked my entire life. And I was broker than broke in every way. Brokenhearted, broke in the bank, broken relationships. Like I lost a lot of my community. So I was in a place of scarcity. I was in a place of like, there's not enough. How am I going to do any of this? Right. But basically like I've even had someone over the course of those years, like someone just donated 10 grand and I was able to do a 5-song EP in Nashville. So like you just never know. He's the God who fills nets. And just start having faith, start expecting it, start asking for it, start inviting people into your dream, start sharing people what your dream is. Start just saying on your social media, I have a dream of recording my songs and making them available for church. Would anybody be interested? I don't know, whatever. Like just invite people into the process with you, and you might be surprised who like says like, oh my gosh, yeah, Josh, like I would love for like to have a recording of that song you sang last Sunday, or gosh, Elizabeth, I would love to be able, whatever. So it's like it's getting brave and letting people in. So anyways, I did my own like social media website, blogging on YouTube, YouTube videos, song tutorials, tour planning, band booking, merch ordering, monthly sales reports. I led worship on Sundays when I would, occasionally get like guest invitations. I booked youth retreats and women's events, and I toured when I could, and I was able to rebuild my life and to make a living. And even after my husband bankrupted me and we went through the whole process and everything, I played coffee shops and bars and restaurants. There was this season that I played at a Mexican restaurant every Friday night for 3 hours, and I got $225 and a free dinner, and that was like the best paycheck in town. So I just like kept that gig as long as I could. And I taught guitar voice and piano lessons. I hustled and I just went after it because I knew God had called me to it. And I knew he had given me a purpose, and I knew that it was giving me fulfillment. And so I'm sharing all that to say I am a living, breathing, walking example that if I can do this, you can do this too. It is not impossible. And the enemy wants to keep you in that place of it's impossible. There's no way. But he's the God who parts the sea, and he's the God who fills empty nets. So be courageous. So in the last 10 years, I've had the honor of being asked to like coach some worship leaders and songwriters in churches on how to like start a publishing company or set up their branding or attempt their first recording or, prep their vocals for an album or anything like that. And I realized how much joy that's like given me to be a part of the process. And then through the process of my research interviews with all of you guys the last couple of weeks, which again, thank you so much for doing that. It's like my mission became so clear in talking to you guys, and you're all a part of that journey with me now. Like I feel like we're like connected forever. And it's just so special. And so like basically this is my mission statement that I've been able to kind of like come up with as a part of these research interviews. I just wanted you to hear where my research landed me. I help struggling singer-songwriters go from frustrated with their amateur recordings and feeling uncertain of the steps to take to release their songs on Spotify and iTunes and receive royalties and revenue from their music, to feeling inspired, fulfilled, and proud of their broadcast quality recordings released like a pro on Spotify, iTunes, etc., so that they can impact the world with their music and use their gifts to draw people closer to God's heart, while earning royalties and building streams of revenue that help fund future recordings and dreams. And so
Great.
that's my
Woo-hoo.
heart for you guys.
Awesome.
I found myself like falling in love with each of you as we talked, because I see my journey in you and I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be facing an empty net. I know what it's like to be like at the end of what's in the checkbook and to see no way for your dreams to happen. And I want to help those of you who feel like your net is empty find a way. And I really feel like God wants to fill your net. So as I was, as it became clear that I was meant to do more than one-on-one coaching and to try to find a way to like reach a wider audience of you guys that I could impact and that I could help more songwriters and churches and ministries. And it's like this whole line mentorship thing just became so clear and like fell in my lap. And so then I felt like God whispered in my heart a couple nights ago, even about the name of the program, and that it was going to be related to my like Starboard Stride journey. And that's partially because I was thinking about my publishing company name, and that's, thinking about that Bible verse again and what that story has meant to me. And so I pulled out that definition of stride again to remind myself of it. And I came across idioms that we use like with stride. And this one nailed me because I felt like this time this phrase is meant for you.
Okay, cool.
For each of you, I feel like God wants you to hit your stride, to begin to do something in a confident and effective way after starting slowly. Like you might feel like you've had a slow start, right? But I really feel like God is going to help you like hit your stride this year. And I feel like that's what this mentorship program has in my heart to do for each of you guys. So as I listen to your struggles and your defeats and your hopes and your dreams, I just really truly believe God wants to help you be able to record and release your music like confidently. Oh no, that's so funny. Sorry, I just got a notification that the Zoom call is going to end in 10 minutes. I forgot that my Zoom account, like I need to re-up it. This is very embarrassing. We may have to hop back in.
So what you can do, so what you can do, you can immediately make a new one and just send us the link and we can keep going. So we'll do that. We'll wait.
We can just do the same meeting link, but it is going to pop us all out in 10 minutes. So you can just join at the same link. I'll restart the same meeting.
Oh, okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, that's
I'm
fine.
still learning. Obviously, I still have room to grow.
Yes,
it can't break our stride.
Right? Thank you so much. Thanks for being encouraging. Oh gosh. So anyways, it might feel like things in that area of your life have been really moving slowly up to this point, but I feel like he's going to really accelerate the process for you these next few months, and that you guys are going to like rise up in some like amazing ways. And so I felt like the name of the mentor program was Hit Your Stride, because I just think that's going to be your outcome. And I feel like you're going to walk with Jesus in stride, like into all that he has for you. And so, for just a few minutes, I'm going to walk you through what I feel like is like the step-by-step process to recording and releasing your music like a pro, so that you can have the impact you desire with your music, and so that you can draw people closer to God's heart and into his presence, right? And so I basically feel like as I was like thinking about all your needs, so as I'm hearing on the research calls like, oh, I need help with this and I don't know how to do this, and like so many things come up, it was almost like it became really clear like the phases that needed to happen for you guys to get from A to Z. And so I'm kind of envisioning like there's these 3 phases that we're going to talk about today. And so these are kind of steps to help get you there. Now, obviously I can't unpack all 12 weeks of curriculum in a 90-minute call even, but I'm going to give you like, here's the bullet points. So you would at least have like the things that you could start to check off your list, right? It's kind of the idea. So phase 1, if you're like, so I have some songs and I want to record, but where do I even start? Which is where a lot of folks were that I talked to on the research calls. So the way that I see that process going is, first of all, you have to choose, the song or songs that you're planning to record. I always recommend a time of like pre-production preparation. Maybe you do some slight rewrites or tweaks or tightening of the arrangement, or, maybe you just need to sharpen up some lyrics here and there. It's a great time to bring in collaborators to give input. Hey, what do you think of this? How does this strike you? Could the chorus be stronger, right? So that's an important part of the process to take some time to do that. Some of you had asked, what if I want to record a cover song? So in order to record a cover song, it is possible to do that, but there are licenses that you have to acquire to be able to record cover songs. They're called mechanical licenses and DPD licenses. DPD stands for Digital Phonorecord Delivery. Basically, digital download is what it means. And those two licenses allow you then to be able to record a cover song with a caveat. Like I know, I think Christine and I were talking about this on her call, that, for example, it's probably going to be pretty hard to license Taylor Swift's song to cover. Like some artists or publishing companies are going to be either harder to reach to get permission, or even if you can reach them, they're going to say, yeah, no, we're not licensing their songs. So it isn't always a yes, but most worship songs are fairly easy to license, because the heart of worship leaders and publishing companies within the worship and Christian realm, they want songs to be recorded. They want songs to be shared amongst churches. They love it. Like, for example, the worship song Breathe. Are you guys familiar with This Is the Air I Breathe? It's like one of the most re-recorded songs out there. And so it's that thing of like, when things almost become viral as we share them in the worship world, you see this church does it and that church does it and someone records it and there's another recording of it, and then there's like 5 million recordings of one song out there. But it's because in the Christian world, we like that multiplicity effect. And so just know that you could probably attain a license where you could record some of your favorite worship songs if you're wanting to do something like that. It's not impossible. And there are ways to do it. So there's a lot of caveats under that, but that's kind of an overview of that. Okay, so then obviously you need to take a look at your production budget, your timeline and deadlines, and how that's going to affect budget, and then look at fundraising. So everyone's always like, well, how much does it cost to produce a song? And that's such a hard question to answer. But, and by the way, if you have questions as I'm like going through all these, definitely write them down, and we'll have plenty of time at the end. We'll do questions at the end. But I thought I would just give a huge overview first, and then I can answer questions where there's still holes that you need help with. Okay, sorry. But basically, I would say, like, okay, for example, when I went to Nashville and I had someone donate some funds to do a record, when I knew that I had $10,000 to work with, I was able to find a producer to work within that budget. And so it allowed me to choose a producer in a studio in Nashville that was very high quality, because I knew I could spend $2,000 a song in that case. But it doesn't mean that it's going to cost you $2,000 to do a song. Basically, there's so many different price points when it comes to working with producers, studios, based on their experience, based on their equipment, based on how long they've been doing it, whatever. There's so many factors. But if I was to try to give you a ballpark of what to expect if you were wanting to go into a studio and record a single tomorrow, I would say the low end would be 500 to 600, and the high end would be like 5,000. It really is like that big of a range. A common range is that 2,000. Well, I would say maybe between 1,000 and 2,000 is a pretty common range, or 1,000 to 2,500 is a very common range for like a studio in Nashville, or maybe even in LA. Not like an A-list studio, but maybe like a B-list studio, if that makes sense. So there's just so many different tiers and factors in that, but it can be done for about 500 to 600, even in. I have a lot of producers that I've worked with that work within that kind of budget. So if you can manage to raise 1,000, I would recommend that, because there's usually other, I wouldn't say like hidden fees, but it's like, for example, if you were able to find a producer who is willing to produce it for 500 or 600, you probably would also still need to hire a mixing and mastering engineer. That could be another 100, 150, 200, 250. Again, there's a sliding scale of how much a mixing or mastering engineer might cost. Or you might have two different people, one person mixing it, one person mastering it, right? So this leads to the next kind of step, which is you have to decide, am I going to hire a producer to get broadcast quality recordings, or am I going to pursue building a home studio and try to get myself up to the point where I can produce broadcast quality recordings? So let's unpack that broadcast quality recordings phrase. So this is a broad phrase that's kind of hard, again, to like unpack in 2 seconds. But the idea is like the songs on the radio, the songs you hear on Spotify by A-list artists like Taylor Swift, their songs are at broadcast quality. Broadcast quality meaning the production is really good quality. It's professional, like everything is done really well. You can tell that the engineers, the mixing and mastering engineers, like the recording, mixing and mastering engineers all really knew what they were doing. It's high quality equipment that's been used in the process. But on top of that, there are broadcast standards. So in other words, you want to have that's where mastering becomes really important, is you want to have the volume and your highs and lows and the peaks and everything be at a point that is broadcast standard. So for example, if you were clicking through songs on Spotify, if all the songs were at different volumes, it would be really annoying to listen to a playlist. If one song was super loud and really like tons of bass and low end, and the next song was really high with tinty stuff, like it would be really annoying. It wouldn't feel connected. And so like Spotify, iTunes, all that have very strict broadcast quality standards. And that usually happens in the mixing mastering process of making sure you're within their parameters. And that's where you need a professional typically to help you get to that point, unless you learn how to do that yourself. So mixing and mastering is a kind of a whole other art that takes time to learn. So even if you learn how to record at home, I would recommend you still hire someone else to mix and master it for you. That's going to ensure they get it to that broadcast quality. They take care of like leveling out all your highs and lows, get it to a quality that iTunes and Spotify would even accept, right? So that's kind of a bare minimum. So even if you're able to produce at home, you need to make sure you're budgeting a little bit for mix and master. Eventually, you could learn to mix and master on your own, and that could be a great goal, but that definitely isn't going to happen overnight, and probably not for your first single. So a friend of mine is a mixing mastering engineer, and actually he teaches production at a college in Columbus, Ohio. And so he has already said like, Sherilyn, I want to be part of your program. Like, yeah, I would love to come in and teach about mixing and mastering and why it's so important and what it even is. I think a lot of people are like, I don't even understand what mixing and mastering really is, right? And so he's going to be able to unpack that. And then I also think it's really important to take care of your voice and to prep vocally for like when it's your time to record vocals. Again, whether you're doing that at home or you're doing that in a studio. So I recommend kind of like a vocal routine of warm-ups, cool downs, and exercises, even in the weeks leading up to the day you're going to record. So you're in really good vocal health when you record. Our voice gets out of shape just like our bodies do. Our vocal cords are a very unique material. There's nothing like it in your body, but they respond a lot like a muscle. So if you imagine how your muscles get sore and stiff and you lose flexibility, you can imagine how, like if you've taken a week off from the gym over the holidays, you know how hard it is to go back. Like it's all that kind of thing with our voice. If we're using it regularly and we're in that regular routine of like, going to the vocal gym every day and getting some healthy, steps logged on our vocal cords, they can be in a good place. But it's like, for example, because I'm not leading worship regularly, I noticed the other day I got invited to go sing for an event. And I was like, oh my gosh, my voice is out of shape because I'm not using it as much as I was. And I'm going to need to be more intentional even about my own like personal practice, because I don't have like 3-hour band rehearsals, every week that are keeping my voice in shape for me. So anyhow, so that's kind of phase 1. It's like getting ready to record, making some decisions on, okay, am I going to pursue this home recording bit, or am I going to go the like hiring a producer and going into a studio route? Is there anybody who is on the call right now who's like, I really want to build a home studio, or maybe you have, and that's like the direction you are going? You want to even just like wave if that's you? Okay, Rachel.
I'd consider in the future, maybe.
Cool.
But
great.
Yeah, once I have like a permanent place, maybe.
Awesome.
We have a home studio, and my husband knows quite a bit about engineering, but I would have to talk to him how much more we need to do. I'm not sure, but we already have the program, and he has some of the knowledge on how to use a recording program. But I think the mixing mastering is, I think most everybody sends that to somebody else, because that's a huge monster.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know one of the other gentlemen who can be on the call, Brian, was curious to find out some more about, like, hey, even suggestions for some gear to get started. So in a little bit, I will go over some of that. If you're like, hey, I want to get started, or, work towards that, I'll give you some lists of like, okay, here's some basic stuff that you need. So I will hit on that shortly. But let's get through these other two phases just so you can kind of get a picture of like the whole overview first. And then we'll kind of come back and do some questions and some specifics where you have questions. Okay, so phase 2, I kind of call it my business phase. So it's like, okay, so at this point, let's imagine, so I've recorded my broadcast quality song. Now what's next, right? So I have this master digital file. What do I do with it? And what's the next steps to actually like do something with it, right? So there's this piece that I feel like a lot of artists, especially in the Christian realm, avoid, because there's almost like this feeling of like, I shouldn't worry about promoting myself, or, like terms like brand development and stuff can feel very like weird or icky. But here's how I like to think of it. I'm using business terms like brand and promo and marketing, because the reality is, if you have a product, which your song is going to be a product, you do have to use some business practices if you're wanting to distribute it, right? So there's just a reality to that. That's the reality of any business that we do, any way we make a living. There's going to be business principles that we need to bring into it if we're trying to make earn any revenue with it, I guess is the point. And I know each of you have all said, literally, I think in all so far 35 interviews I've done, I think every single person, without me prompting them, said, I'm not looking to like get rich, or I'm not looking to be famous. I just want to make an impact with my music and like be able to like make some money and pay my bills. There's some who are like, I want to like have that be my living, but there's nobody who said like, I'm looking for like a way to get rich, so it's like, I know that's not your heart is to get rich, but there is a reality of like, even if it's just earning enough revenue to fund your next project, so anyways, all that to say, I think we have to take some of the like any guilty weird feelings out of earning money from it, or treating it like a business. So I think it's really important, even as a worship leader, Christian artist, whatever you are, to decide like what your brand is in a way, and to work on a little bit of brand development. And what I mean by is this, if I can even give you like a tiny exercise you could do as well. I have worked with some brand development people in the Christian realm and in the secular realm. This exercise actually came from a really cool Christian guy in the music business who has also worked on both sides of the business. But this is kind of the exercise that he uses with his artists to help them develop their own brand. But he encourages you to choose power colors for yourself, and to decide, if you were to wave a personal banner over your head like a flag, what 3 phrases would be on it that described you? What's the banner over your head? So for me, can anyone guess what my power colors are?
Red.
Actually, look at the screen.
Oh, what screen?
Oh, sorry, you can't see.
Maybe, I don't know.
What's that?
Like peacock blue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Peach and white. I don't know.
Gold and midnight blue. So kind of green and gold-ish kind of.
Oh, okay. I guess it doesn't look like that on my side, but that's
yeah. It's kind of like a peacock. Yeah, it's like that kind of like midnight green, however you want to call it. I don't know the exact term for it either. But basically, if you were to go to my Instagram page and kind of scroll through, since I've started employing this, you're going to see that like there's tons of gold, there's tons of this kind of peacock blue green kind of feeling. Like you're creating a tone for what you feel really represents you. I know that might seem silly, but I actually have been really enjoying it because here's the thing, it was colors I was just naturally drawn to anyways. It was like I would look in my closet and I was like, oh, I have a ton of gold and green. Like I would even like my purses. I buy, like just things I'm drawn to, like those things that like feel like you. I would say that like one of the things that he had said when he looked at my Instagram, when he looked at some of my artist stuff, he's like, you have a lot of like girly pink in your pictures and your artwork and stuff, but he's like, you're like powerful and you're like, he's like, you need your visual stuff to reflect who you are, so it's
Very
not
cool.
just disingenuous to who you are, but it's actually owning who you are all the more. And so he's like, you're not like fluffy and feminine and pink. He's like, you are like fierce and powerful and bold and whatever. So that's really the next part of the exercise, is to ask.
Oh, like a peacock. Like
yeah,
a
right? Exactly. Totally. But like ask the Lord and ask your own heart, like, who am I and what do I want my music to represent and say? Okay, so my banner, and this like, forgive me because it involves an expletive, but basically it's like independent, badass, female, bold, courageous. Like that's me. I'm like all out on the table, like all out, right? And so my banner, that's the banner I'm waving. And it's not, I'm not timid, I'm not shy, but I think for many years I lived in that space. I felt that way, but it wasn't really who I was. And so I'm really stepping into who I really am. So I just encourage you guys to like step into who you really are and stop
And
hiding.
don't wait until you're 50.
I feel you. So figure out what your banner says over you and choose some colors that inspire you and just start using those colors on your artwork for your albums. Use it on your Instagram. Wear clothes in that color and take photos to post on social media or your website or whatever, and just start building a feeling for who you are, what you represent. And that starts to just develop your brand a little bit. That's just one piece of it, but I think honestly it's a pretty cool one. So as we're, oops, I think I got on the wrong slide. We're already on phase 3 on the picture here, but phase 2, back to phase 2 is, you want to work on creating cover art and promo pieces for your album. So I have figured out ways to do this on like a shoestring budget. You can hire people, and there are times that I felt overwhelmed and have hired graphic artists to help me. Usually I'm asking a friend who I know is a graphic art, hey, like, would you help me create a cover? How much would you charge for it? And a lot of time a friend will be like, oh, like, $50 or something, like, so you can sometimes just employ your friends who have some skills, and pay them a little something that might be helpful to them. But there's so many cheap and easy resources now these days with Canva, of which a lot of you are probably familiar with.
How do you spell that?
Canva. So canva.com. They have a free tier, and then like you do have to pay to kind of unlock some of their more premium stuff. But like the slides that you're seeing, who those of you who can see the slides, sorry, Elizabeth, but like that was all created in Canva. They make it really easy. There's tons of templates and stuff. So Canva's a really great resource. They have, you can literally type in like album art or cover art or, CD art or whatever, like you can type in and search and it'll have templates that you can use. Another one that's similar to Canva is called Placeit.
Come, you better.
And so Placeit, and I think that one's maybe .net. Yeah, and so Placeit is another really good one. That one is, I actually started with that one because it felt a little not necessarily more user-friendly than Canva, but their templates, they had a lot more templates that like made it really easy for me, I guess. Canva, I felt like I had to get a little more creative, whereas Placeit, almost it was like I could just like choose one of their templates and put my name and put my title and it was done. So it was like really easy. But it could be as simple as, having a photograph that you're pulling from either a photograph you've taken yourself, or you could go to like unsplash.com. If you're not familiar with unsplash.com, they have royalty-free photos that you can download on their website that you could use for part of your album art or part of your website or promo pieces or whatever. So I've used Unsplash. those of you who've like heard my single Have You Seen Me Now, that photo with the newspaper, the girl in the fire and everything, that was an Unsplash photo. And then I added my name and my song title. That's all I did. And I did like an overlay. Like I did add a little bit of art element, but basically Place It helped me do all that. It was very easy to put that together. The beautiful thing about using those templates is then they're usually the right specs, because Spotify and iTunes and all they do have specs that it needs to be like a certain size and certain, I'm not good at all these terms, but like a certain number of pixels or whatever, right? So most of like Canva and Place It, if you use a template, it should be to the correct specs already. And because they know that Spotify and iTunes have those, so they've built their platforms in a way to make it really easy for you. But just know if you were to try to create it on your own, if you do know how to use like other programs like Photoshop or whatever, I actually don't know how to use any of those more high-tech design programs, but you would have to get the specs and make sure that you're creating it to the right specs. Which those are things you can find out when you get to the point of the third-party distribution, which we'll get to here in a sec. Okay, so then, like we mentioned at the very beginning of the call, we want to make sure that we're registering with a performing rights organization, PRO for short. And that's the way that you set up yourself as a writer, but also your self-publishing company. And then I would also encourage you to come up with a record label name. And here's why. It seems another one of the things that you're like, this seems so silly and so strange. But when you get to the point of entering your song into third-party distribution, and that means like going to a site like DistroKid or CD Baby, or I've heard some people, use TuneCore. There's literally so many third-party distributors you could choose from. Again, I don't have time to go into all of them and all the differences between them, but let's just say they're very similar in prices. They do vary in features and how they work, but honestly, like most people in the professional realm that I know, both on the CCM Christian side and kind of in the more like TV ad, film, pop radio side, use either DistroKid or CD Baby. Those are the top two. My personal opinion, I've used both. I've been happy with both. For the moment, DistroKid suits my needs better. But anyways, like I said, there's so many details, but DistroKid allows someone who maybe has multiple monikers. So for me, like I have Christian music, I have stuff I do for TV ad and film, I have kids worship stuff I've done, I have an instrumental album, like I have all these different like names and projects. I do like side co-writing with people, and I have that, so I have like my instrumentals are called, the artist name is Drift of It. I have this like side hustle thing that I do that's called Listen to Frankie. And, so it's like, DistroKid allows me to almost have like multiple monikers under my account for like one fee. That's like having a record label, like a mini record label. Like these are all the artists on my record label. So it allows you to kind of.
That's so cool. You're all the artists under your label. That's exactly why you need a label. That's so cool.
Yeah, but basically, if you're entering your music into any third-party distribution, it's going to ask you to enter your record label name, and then it'll even say in fine print, just put anything, it doesn't really matter. Like I think on the DistroKid page, I think it says that, and it's kind of funny. The whole idea is back in the day when record labels, like when the only way to get your song out and on the radio or a record cut was to do it through a record label. And there was a day and age when that really was like the case. Like there wasn't a way for an indie artist really to do their thing. You had to get a record label to help you do that. So back in the day, a record label was required to release music and distribute it, basically. But over the course of many years, now you don't have to have a record label to distribute. You can distribute independently, which is how we get the indie artist or independent artist term. So if you don't have a record label or you don't have a publishing company, you are your own publishing company and you are your own record label. So congrats. You all have your own publishing company and record label.
Quick question. Does that have to be licensed or registered? Or is it just put in that phrase when you just decide what it is and you just use that when they ask you that question?
Yes. Interestingly enough, For both a publishing company and record label, it's mostly just terms used behind the scenes to make sure money gets to you. It's nothing that's written on any tax returns or anything like that. For example,
Okay.
I have the PRO that I chose is ASCAP. Again, there's differences between ASCAP and BMI. I don't have time to go into all those today, but I chose ASCAP and there are reasons why, so you can choose as you like. But and I will get into this in the mentorship program. We'll have time to go into all the details. But if you're just looking for some quick answers today, I recommend ASCAP. Basically, ASCAP then has, I'm a songwriter as Sherilyn A. Keller. I usually use my full name. Again, the more unique you can make your names, the easier it is to make sure royalties get to you. So for your writing name, that can be different than your artist name. In fact, I think even within the PRO, it's going to give you the opportunity to say, what's your legal name? What's your artist name or moniker you go by? What's any previous names? Like I used to be known as Sherry Carr as an artist before when I was married. That was my married name, and I didn't go by Sherilyn. I went by my nickname Sherry for most of my life. So as an artist, I was Sherry Carr for many years. And then when I walked through divorce, I decided I didn't want to carry his last name forever. And so then I was like, okay, I think that I want to change my artist name. So that's when I decided to go to just Sherilyn. I was like, I'm going to get the last name out of it so I never have to go through this again. And I decided I was just going to go by my full given name and kind of branded myself as Sherilyn. So in ASCAP, I have an account under my full name, Sherilyn A. Keller, right? And then under that, I have, okay, I used to be Sherry Carr, and I've done stuff as Sherry Keller before I was married. And so they see all the different names I've done stuff. And then I've released songs as Listen to Frankie. I've released songs as Mountain Brick Kids Worship, all these different things I've done, but it's all connected to who I am and my ASCAP ID. And then in addition, so that's my writer's side. On the other side, then I have the publishing company side, where then I chose my unique publishing company name. And like I said, ASCAP will work with you. Like if you'll submit a name and they'll be like, sorry, it's taken. And you're like, crud, okay. So, so you kind of have to work through the process to find a unique publishing company name. So that becomes your publishing company side. So then in the future, when you go and you register each song individually, which you do have to do that as well. You have to, every time you release a new song, you need to go and register that new song with ASCAP. And then you're able to say, okay, who's the artist, who's the publishing company, who's the record label. And when you register your song, that literally is just in their database to ensure that then when you submit your song through DistroKid, that song that's out there on Spotify and iTunes and TikTok and everywhere, that all those pennies trickle back to your publishing account, anything released for Starboard Stride Music, and then Sherilyn Carr or Sherry Carr, Sherilyn Keller, all the streams on this site, all my own. So it's just collecting all these penny streams and making sure they get to you from like a gazillion different streams. So that's just so it's really all just in the database of the PRO to help collect all that. So, but the final part of that is checks that come in the mail to me come to Sherilyn A. Keller. So even for my publishing stuff, they're not writing a check to Starboard Stride Music, because you can set it up that way. If you want to set up a publishing company and tell them you want them to write a check to Starboard Stride Music, they can. But you can set up your publishing company check to come to you, the owner of your publishing company, as Sherilyn A. Keller. So you don't have to set up
Right.
this, but you could if you wanted to separate. If you get to the point where you're getting so much revenue, you want to protect yourself personally from your business, yes, go ahead and set up your business. But I'm just saying you don't have to set up your publishing company or record label as a legal entity or business until you get to the point you have so much revenue that you need to protect yourself, basically. Does that make sense? Cool. Sorry, that's a big one. That part can get very confusing. There's actually one more piece of it called like the master split as well. That's kind of like a whole different talk, but there's the writer part, there's the publishing part, and then there's the master recording. So anytime you record music, the finished product is called the master recording. So you decide in the process of all your collaborating. For example, that Have You Seen Me Now song that a lot of you have probably heard, that was a co-write with a guy from Nashville named Ten Skolitz, a great producer, friend of mine, known him for years. We co-wrote it together by Zoom. I recorded the vocals and some basic synth stuff at my house. He recorded all the rest at his house. We, produced it all together collaboratively. We had a conversation right at the beginning that we were going to split everything 50-50. So we split writers' royalties 50-50, we split publishing 50-50, and we split the master 50-50. So in other words, that recording of Have You Seen Me Now, he and I own that master recording half and half. So every time it gets used, any revenue that ever comes in from that master recording, we split it half and half. So somewhere in the process, you have to have conversations with all your collaborators every step of the way, very clear, and get on paper what are the splits. So when you enter a songwriting session with someone, usually even before you write it, hey, you know what, as we enter the session today, what do you think about just splitting everything 50-50 for this song? Because it gets really hard to go like, I think I contributed 10% here, whatever. It might be different if you have a mostly completed song and you invite someone to help you finish it. I usually will then say like, hey, I have most of the song. I could really use help with verse 2. Would you be up for a co-write with me for like a 25% split? And you kind of offer up front before you enter into any writing together what you're willing to offer them, and make sure they agree to that before they offer anything. Does that make sense? So that's
it makes sense. But do you split writer, publishing, and master, or do you just split the writing and you keep all the publishing on all the master unless you some people might say, what's the best benefit to the person who's in the co-write? Which parts do you split? The writer, publishing, master? What?
It depends what they're contributing to. So if you're sitting down to write a song with a friend, they're contributing to the writing. So then the next, once you decide, so just worry about the writing first, right? You worry about the writing first. And the next step then is when you get ready to record it, you would go back to that writer and say like, hey, I'm getting ready to cut this song. And this is where there's kind of like no one way to do it. And this I may have to move on from this just because it could take an hour.
Yeah, we can talk about it later. I don't want to talk it
real
down.
Quick, I'll try to say some just real quick basics. Then you would kind of say okay, well, it's going to cost about $1,000 to record this the way I want. Do you want to split the cost of producing it with me? And then you could also get 50% of the publishing.
Okay.
So then you can kind of work a deal with them to have them contribute financially, but then they also would get royalties financially. Or you can say, I'm willing to pay all of the production fees if you're comfortable with me getting all of the publishing and master royalties, but they would still get writing royalties. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And most writers kind of go, oh, sure, that's fine. I don't have $500, to give you for this, It's not their project. They help write the song, but it's not their project.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah. Hey, welcome in, Michael. I think you snuck in when I was chatting. It's good to have you. Okay. So then the typically it's the writers who are getting a split of the writing and potentially publishing if they're wanting to invest with you. The master, sometimes the producer might want a cut of the master. So again, before you enter into an agreement, make sure you get on paper the expectations, or just flat out say, I'm not offering a cut of the master. What would you charge me in that case? Because producers sometimes will charge you less if you give them a cut of the master, which can be a leveraging thing. If I only have $500 and their fee is normally $1,000, I could say, hey, I don't have $1,000, but what if you got 50% of the master? Would you be willing to do it for $600? So you can use that as a negotiating.
Yeah, leverage.
But just make sure you're having those conversations along the way, and you're getting on paper what the agreements are, not just so you have it on paper, but you will literally forget. The more you're writing and the more you're producing, by the time you get to getting entering your splits at the third-party distribution, piece, you'll be like, wait, what split did we talk about? So just make sure you have it on paper. You keep those things on file so you can go back to them anytime that you need to revisit what you agreed to, because you will need at some point to enter those split percentages, both with your PRO and with your third-party distributor, in the case of DistroKid, who handles then distributing those royalties according to those splits automatically for you. You don't want to get in the place where you're having to admin that yourself. It would be a nightmare. So I highly recommend using DistroKid's like distribution of your royalties that they offer. Okay, I'm going to try to move quickly through the rest of these, and then I want to get to more of your questions. So we left off here. Okay, so submitting your master recording and cover art to third-party distributors. So we touched on this already a little bit. So DistroKid is who I'm using. CD Baby is great. But this is who gets it to like the giant list of all of the places that carry music. And it is a giant list. What's cool about a lot of them, I haven't been on CD Baby in a couple years now, honestly, because I've been doing my stuff through DistroKid the last 2 years. But I know that DistroKid allows you to literally check mark which platforms you want your music sent to. So if for some reason you don't want your music sent to all platforms, you can hand select which ones you do or don't. They offer some additional perks, but it's going to cost. So it's like you can pay to a little bit extra to have your song on Shazam. I don't know if you guys are all familiar with Shazam, but Shazam is an app on your phone that you can have. If you can like say, I want to Shazam this song that's playing in this restaurant where I'm at because I want to know what it is. And then Shazam has all these amazing algorithms that like goes, oh, well, it's this song, and it'll show you what song's being played. So, but you have to register your song with Shazam to have it pull up when someone's searching. So DistroKid charges a little extra to get your song to Shazam. So just a little caveat for Michael, since you just came in, I did a big fail and I failed to upgrade my Zoom account. And so this call is going to end in 10 minutes, but just pop back into the same link and we'll reopen. So sorry about that. Learning lesson for me. Okay. So once you get your song then submitted to your third-party distributor, that's where you're going to enter the master recording. That's where you enter your cover art. That's where you tell them who are the writers. You can even enter in like who the producer was so that it'll show up on Spotify who produced it. There's like lots of behind the scenes stuff that happens when you enter that. You set up your percentage splits so that when the royalties start coming in and revenue comes in from people purchasing on iTunes or whatever, right? That all of that money then gets automatically sent to you guys and all of your collaborators and stuff. So, one of the bonus things that I will go over as a part of the course is like, how do I get my songs on CCLI and Song Select? I don't know if you're all familiar with what that is, but a quick thing on that is that CCLI is basically an organization that helps make sure that every time, you know, people are singing Chris Tomlin's song at church, that Chris Tomlin gets royalties from that, right? But that can be in your advantage too, that if people started singing your songs in their church, you would actually be able to get some revenue for that. So that was kind of one of my biggest moments when I got my first CCLI check. And it was really powerful to be like, oh my gosh, churches are singing my songs. It got me. I was like, to me, that was almost like, it meant more to me almost than anything else to know that people were using my songs to worship God in their own churches.
Wow.
And that strangers I didn't know were singing things I wrote in my bedroom in my darkest moments, you know? So anyways, you can get your songs registered with CCLI. It's a bit of a process, but it can be done. Song Select is a tool that a lot of worship leaders use. Some of you might use it, but it's a database of all the songs that exist in CCLI, basically the songs that have been registered with CCLI. And it has lyrics. I think even if you pay the additional thing with Song Select to use their services, chord charts, and that kind of thing. So it's just another database for people to be able to discover your songs. If they're like looking for a song on theme of faithfulness and they type, I want to find a song on faithfulness, your song could potentially pop up. They could discover your songs through CCLI Song Select. So it's just another way to help get your songs out there, get exposure. If you want to submit your stems, of your song. So once you have your master recording, and this will be part of like when we'll talk about in the course, like when you need to make sure you get deliverables. So you need to make sure you get the master, but you also get an instrumental. and that you get stems. So like they'll dump all the drums onto a stem, they'll dump all the vocals onto a stem, you know, like, so that way if churches wanted to use your song and they wanted to use the multi-tracks behind it, you know, then they have a way to do that. So multitracks.com, again, it's a process to kind of like establish with them, but you can. I do have the song that I released this year on Easter is up with multitracks. What's cool is they typically will do a little bit of free promo for you. So I got kind of, you know, featured in one of their emails. It helps get you some exposure. Worshipteam.com is another service similar to Planning Center, but you have to ask to become a part of their database. So there's so many things in the Christian realm, church realm, of ways you can get into databases and platforms that just makes your music more searchable and findable by other people. And that again gives you more ways for pennies to be trickling back to your account and just continue to fund what you really want to do. Okay, home stretch is the phase 3 is then, okay, so my songs have been submitted for distribution, but what now? So typically, I recommend, as Spotify recommends, or your third-party distributor is going to recommend, that you plan on 4 weeks between when you submit it for distribution and when it releases. So it's going to ask you when you submit your song at DistroKid or whatever, what do you want your release date to be? It'll even say, we recommend, you know, giving 4 weeks. I think that's a good routine to get into because then it gives you a month to prepare for your release. And it gives you time to get some other things done and promote it well. If you push your release too quick, you're just kind of cutting yourself off at the knees, or you're not really giving yourself time to like ramp up to that release well. But it can be done if you're on a deadline. So again, just a caveat, like if you're like, my pastor, his dream is that I could like release a song for our kids camp this summer and I'm on a deadline, I'm trying to get this done, and or I'm trying to get a song ready for Easter, I'm trying to get a song ready for Christmas. If you're like on a deadline, secret is it can push fast. I've had it push as fast as like a day. But they don't promise it will. And they always say like, we can't promise that it will get to all platforms by then. And typically Spotify and iTunes are the fastest, and they usually can turn over in a couple days. But a lot of the other platforms, they'll trickle in literally over the next month. And so your song won't be available on every platform in a couple of days, but it will trickle out kind of over the next month. So little side caveat, if you need to rush something for an event, sometimes it can be done. I literally, like the song I did for Easter, I thought I was going to be done with recording sooner, but we ended up having all these like issues and long story. But anyhow, so I ended up like not having the master until 2 days before Easter. And I was so freaked out that it wasn't going to be like out and ready. And we'd already promoted that there was going to be a new song releasing on Easter. And I was like, oh my gosh. So, but thank the Lord, it came through. I prayed all night the night before Easter that it would show up on Spotify, you know, at midnight or whatever. So, okay. So basically you want to spend this month, it's a kind of a gift to you. Like you've done all this hard work, you've got your song submitted. Okay. Use this month to prepare for the release. There's things you can do like submitting your lyrics to the distributor. This allows for like, you know, if someone wants to do like a Spotify, or excuse me, an Instagram story of your song, you know how you can like do a song and then you can have it like pull up the lyrics on their story automatically. This is how that happens. So like you have to do the work as the artist to tell your third-party distributor, make my lyrics available on, you know, Instagram stories or whatever. So there's just things you have to do like behind the scenes, and it takes time. You want to make sure that you've connected your social media accounts, like so that like, for example, if you were trying to promote your own music, that you don't get flagged for using copyrighted material. So it puts you kind of on a whitelist where you're allowed to use your own songs in your own promotions. You want to be preparing promo art, video clips, you know, building a release plan. And again, part of the whole branding idea we talked about earlier of just like not being ashamed to say like, sharing with the world what you're doing. Hey guys, like it's so amazing, God provided, or you were all a part of this, and you know, you helped me raise the funds, and the single's almost here, and you know, you start to release, here's the artwork, and you know, here's a little 10-second clip teaser. Like you just get people excited. It's kind of that, you know, Christmas morning feeling. You want them to feel like release day is that Christmas morning feeling, and just trying to involve people in the process. Because here's the thing, it's like everyone, all all the people who love you and support you, your friends and that follow you on Instagram, eventually when you have fans that follow you and things like that, like they just want to know you. They love the behind the scenes. They're going to want to see like, what are you doing behind the scenes? Like, I think it's almost like the more, especially in this day and age, the more gritty and real you can be, the better. Like people don't want a glossy influencer thing. They just want to know like they're not alone and that someone like them could accomplish something bigger as well. And so you end up inspiring other people to pursue their dreams too. And so just don't be afraid to like share your successes and always pointing people to, you know, to God for the glory, but don't minimize yourself in the process too. Like you reflect him to the world, and you walking confidently and beautifully in what God's called you to do will inspire other people to do the same. You will become an inspiration to people. You can spend this month also deciding whether or not you want to like produce a lyric video or music video. I'm not going to say a whole lot on that because that's a whole other ball of wax, but those are some ways that you can promote your music. And then you just want to celebrate when your single, your album comes out. Sometimes it's fun to have like a premiere, like listening party and get people involved. It could be in person, or it could be social media, or a combination of both. Like, but it's just that thing of like building some momentum up to a moment. That Christmas morning feeling is really fun. Well, hello, my friends. So those who are on the call live know that I had some Zoom fails, and because it has that 40-minute time constraint, and I didn't realize that I had not renewed my subscription so that I could have calls longer than that. So I so apologize that I didn't press record for the final call. And so it meant that I missed the portion where folks asked some questions, but I think I remember at least 3 of the questions. And so I'm going to recreate the answers for those and make sure that those of you who couldn't be on the call live at least get to have that information. So where I left off is I was basically saying at the end of phase 3, you've had your release party, you've celebrated your release. Then what, right? So there are things that you can do with your music once it's released. Part of that would be Spotify playlist considerations. Part of that is you could explore opportunities for licensing your song. You could look into sync licensing opportunities, and sync being any music that's synced to video. So that could be commercials, TV shows, movies. You could sync your music for podcasts. There's lots of different ways, video games. But basically anytime that you hear music anywhere, someone got paid to have their song used. So even if you're watching a TV show and on the TV show, someone's listening to a song on the jukebox at a bar while they're sipping drinks with a friend, that song on the jukebox is a song that they had to license to use in their show. So it's kind of amazing. You don't even realize how much of the world is full of music all day long. But there are writers who are getting paid for those pieces. There's writers that are getting paid for the music behind sports shows. So when you're watching car racing or football or any of that, like all the music behind, you know, the clips of replays and the commercial breaks and whatever, like all those lead-ins, lead-outs, you know, to talk shows, like everything has, someone had to create that music and someone's getting paid. So there's no reason why it couldn't be you. And there is a need for faith-based music out as well. So there are opportunities. And for the last couple of years, I have been diving into the realm of sync licensing. And I do have an agent that's representing a handful of my songs and working on pitching those for placement in TV, ad, and film. So haven't had any placements just yet, but I'm working on it. Most folks say it's kind of a long game and to expect it to take 2 to 3 years before you start landing placements. And most people who are doing it really successfully have a library of 1,000 or more songs. So in the last couple of years, I have a library of about 12 songs. So that gives you an idea. But it is kind of a long goal for me to keep building my library and to keep pursuing those opportunities. So I'm going to recreate these questions that I remember. So one of the gals, Rachel, was asking like, how do I find producers or mixing and mastering engineers if I don't have any connections and I don't know where to look? And I thought that was a great question. The first thing I would say is use me as a resource. You know me now, and I have been blessed to have 25 years of recording experience. And just through that time, I have gotten to know people from around the country, even around the world, who are producers or mixing and mastering engineers. And I do quite often go back and use a lot of the same people because you develop great working relationships with them. And but there was a time last year I was on a deadline. I was actually writing a song for a sync licensing course that I was taking, and there was a deadline, and I was having a hard time finding a producer who was available, or excuse me, well, producer and mixing and mastering engineer that was available. And sometimes it is one and the same. I have several that I work with that do it all as a package, and that's great if you can find like one fee that includes mixing and mastering. So it just so happened this was that guy, but I think I'm like trying to remember how I discovered him, but I think I literally just started searching for mixing mastering engineers and came across him, went to his website, listened to his samples, like, and it was very random. I have found sometimes that I'll go into Facebook groups as a really good place to go. I've joined a lot of singer-songwriter groups, producer groups, there's worship leader groups, but you can literally post in the group, hey, I'm looking to do a worship EP. Has anybody worked with a mixing mastering engineer they would recommend? A lot of times you'll get lots of people that you could look into. You could troll those groups for yourself and see what producers are in there, or, you know, and you could do your own research. But yeah, you kind of have to get scrappy and you have to kind of really dig around, and it's kind of like going to a Goodwill store. You might have to kind of dig to find a good piece amongst all the rest. And so you just have to be willing to kind of sift through the weeds to find the good ones. But then usually once you find, you know, a good one, you can go back and have that relationship continue for years to come. And so it's worth searching for. But yeah, use me. I do have a fairly decent list of people from around the country. I know folks in Seattle, California. I know folks in Texas, in Ohio. It's hard to think off the top of my head. I know people in Brazil. I know people in the UK. So I do have a handful of connections. So utilize me as a resource. Okay, another question I think was Elizabeth's question, and that was like, hey, we have a home studio where we can record some stuff at home. Do you think that we could record something at, you know, high quality enough that we could just send it out for mixing and mastering? So for this, I think I used an analogy and said yes, but picture this: if you had hired a really great sound engineer to to run sound at a live concert, and so they bring in all their amazing mixing gear and they set up their console, and this guy totally knows what he's doing. But let's say a band comes in and they have guitars that aren't so great, and the strings are out of tune, and their microphones have been dropped a few times and there's dents in them. Maybe their cables that need to be replaced and they're staticky. Maybe the singer is a little off pitch. Maybe the drummer doesn't quite play in time. You have to imagine there's only so much a live sound engineer can do to fix that. And so it's the same with recording. As long as you're able to have decent equipment, you know how to use it and how to mic it, and you have, you know, good cables and good software. And if you have enough of that equipment, if you're able to give a clean performance, you're able to sing pretty well in tune. I would mention that in this day and age, tuning the vocal is pretty much industry standard. So broadcast quality usually is like, you're going to tune your vocals. I even have had to tune whistles in a song where I had whistles. So just keep in mind that you will need to have your vocals tuned, most likely. The program that most people use for tuning vocals is called Melodyne. You can purchase it. You can use how to use it yourself. You could learn to tune your own vocals, but you can also typically pay for a mixing engineer to edit and tune your vocals for you. Sometimes there is an extra charge for that. It could be an extra 100, 150, depending on how many vocal stacks you might have done, because you need to tune background vocals, any oohs or ahs or anything. You want all those to be as tight as possible. They also can edit out breaths if you're really noisy, like breaths and stuff like that. They can just tidy things up to get it to that clean broadcast quality. So hopefully that helps a bit. It is possible to record parts at home. I record parts right here. You can't see my whole studio from this shot, but there's like a keyboard over here. Obviously you see some guitars on the wall. I have a guitar amp over there. So typically I know my strengths. My strengths are my vocals. which I actually record in my closet. I had this station, and I will, as part of the program, as I will give you like a behind the scenes look at my whole setup here at home. But I have everything, this whole station that I'm sitting on right now with my computer and all my, like I have my interface where I record through is on wheels. So then I can wheel my whole little desk into my closet, so I can record vocals in a nice isolated room, kind of like an isolation booth. But out here, then I have my studio monitors. I have a keyboard. This is kind of my main room where I work the rest of the time. So my strengths are recording keyboard parts. So if it's synth pads, piano, I'm really comfortable doing that. I'm really comfortable doing my vocals. I usually have someone else do guitars, bass, drums, because those are not my strength. I might feel comfortable enough to do some simple acoustic guitar tracks. I haven't really on anything that I've done recently. There might have been some projects in the past I've played my own acoustic guitar, but so I'm usually looking to team up with a producer or other musicians. Like I have a friend who sometimes I'll have come in and do electric guitar tracks or bass tracks. Typically when I'm working with producers, they're programming drums, so it's not typically live drums, but there's so many great drum samples, they sound real. And so anyways, I hope that helps answer Elizabeth's question again. And then I think Josh had a question. Basically, I think he was saying that they were hoping to release a Christmas single for his church. And he was kind of asking like, hey, you've almost given us like this 12-week sort of plan. Like, would we have time to do all this? And could you do some of the business stuff while you're recording, or do they really have to go in this step? So, or in this order? So basically the 12 steps and the order is not as important as just it all needs to be done. That's a flow that I've found that works for me, or at least thinking about it that way. But a lot of it can be done at the same time. You could literally be in the recording studio and your mixing engineer could be, editing vocal tracks, and you could be sitting on your computer registering your PRO or working on artwork or whatever. Like, there's not necessarily a right order to do things. Completely. I mean, obviously you can't submit your stuff to a third-party distributor until your master and your artwork is done. So there are things like you do have to do before you can submit it, but you can think backwards. So he was mentioning like, oh gosh, we were kind of thinking of releasing it December 1st. I think that might be a little too soon because we're already almost to November 1st. So I always think backwards. If I have a goal or a deadline for my release date, I'm gonna think backwards. So I'm gonna say, let's be a little more generous and say, what if we released it like December 20th? And it's kind of like, oh, here's our Christmas gift to you, right before Christmas. So if you're releasing on December 20th, you need to work backwards from there you wanna try to give 4 weeks that you're submitting it to your distributor, your third-party distributor, right? So if that was really true, that would actually take us into November. Now, like I did mention earlier in the call, when you're on a deadline, you can push the envelope a bit. And so let's say maybe you try to aim for having your finished master and artwork by December 1st. That would give 20 days to release. That should be plenty of time. So let's make that our goal. So maybe you say, I have from November 1st to December 1st to record my song, do the artwork, get it mixed, get it mastered. Those are the key things that you need. And then you would need your record label name, whatever you might choose. Those are the things that you would need to be able to submit. You would need to have, had those conversations about any splits. So you would need to be able to enter your splits in at that time. Those can be entered in after the fact, but promise me you'll forget if you just don't do it like while you're submitting it all. But things like the PRO registration, your publishing company, that could all happen later after you submit it for distribution, because you're not going to be collecting any money until it releases. So you can do some of that business stuff after the fact. I just like to do it typically before, because I feel like it, what's the word? I don't know. It might influence things, whether it's your artwork or whatever. Like, it's going to influence branding or different things. I just think I like to have my business all my ducks in a row before I plan to release anything. But if you're pushed to a deadline and you're trying to accomplish something quick, it could be done after. So I hope that helps a little bit. And gosh, Josh, I can't wait to hear your single if you're able to make this happen. So keep us posted on that. So I think that I covered all the questions that were done live. I did want to mention, Brian, that I know you had questions about the how to set up a recording studio at home, what equipment to get. I have a little handout that I can just send to you by email. So I'll do that for you, Brian. I know Josh actually asked if I could send that to him. So I sent that off. If there's anyone else who's listening to this call that you want that list of how to build a home studio and just some recommended gear to start with, I'm happy to send that over to you. Just let me know if you want that. But I won't spend time going over it because not everybody was looking to do that right now. Okay, so gosh, if you have like taking the time to listen this far, thanks so much for taking time to hang out with me. And if you need to go, totally understand. But if you'd like to stick around and hear a little bit about the mentor program that I'm starting, after all this research from you that you guys have informed me so well about what the needs are out there, if you want to hang out just a few more minutes about those specifics, I will share with you an opportunity where you could win a free 1-hour coaching call with me if you stick around to the end. So here we go. So through all my research with you guys, I really do feel like it became clear like where the needs were. In hearing like all of your struggles, frustrations, like I don't know the next steps, I don't know how to do this. I feel like that whole kind of picture came clear of like, oh, well, here's the 12 steps that can be done. And I really felt like just breaking it into a 12-week mentor program was going to be like a good amount of time to allow you to really do the steps in that amount of time. So where you could really go from like having a song you've written to a single release, I think there is that possibility. It could happen. And so I think that's a realistic timeline, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the idea is that the 12-week mentor program would include 6 one-on-one mentoring calls. Those could be booked as you like, just using my Calendly calendar, just like you booked those research calls. 12 weekly group curriculum coaching calls. So basically each week, we would go through those 12 steps, but unpack all the details of it. I would give you links where you needed to go do things like register. I would give you homework. I'd give you resources. I'd be available if you want to book a call and be like, oh my gosh, I need help this week. Could we talk about, my plans here and could you advise me? So those would be weekly. We would determine the time and day those would happen based on who enrolls and what your availability is. So I would do my very best to make sure that everyone could attend those, hopefully in person on Zoom, but also would record the calls, and we'll have all my recording dialed in by then to make sure that you're able to always watch the replay and also that you could keep those recordings forever. So if you ever need to return to them, you would have access to those. And then 12 weekly group Q&A coaching calls. So we'd set another time later in the week where, hey, if we have, I don't know, the curriculum call on Monday, maybe it's Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, we have a Q&A coaching call where you can come with questions now. So maybe you dove into some of the homework assignments and you're like, oh my gosh, I need help here. Or whatever it might be coming up in your journey, because not everyone's journey is linear, right? So even though I'm lining up those 12 steps, you might be at different places in the process. And so we want to customize the experience to you and to your needs. That's why I wanted to include some of the one-on-one coaching, even so that you each have a little bit more of a personal experience, and then always leaving time for questions, making sure we have lots of time for questions. Okay, so I mentioned that I have a guest expert who's planning to come in and teach a mixing and mastering talk, and then you would have lifetime access to a private Facebook group just for us. So I think all of you who are listening are already members of my indie singer-songwriters Facebook group, and that one is going to be intended to be opened up to a wider audience, really to help hopefully find singer-songwriters just like you who need some coaching, need some mentoring, need help knowing the next steps. So that's hopefully that community will grow. But I want to have another even more private community that's for those of you who I am mentoring, so that I can have a direct connect to you. But you'll have lifetime access to that group. So hopefully for years to come, as I'm teaching more cohorts and people are coming through the program, it just becomes this like bigger and bigger community of those of you who have worked with me directly, who can encourage each other. You guys can collab together, whatever, like form this community of people. And I want you to know that my heart is I don't intend to open the door for this course to anyone. I've been part of courses where it's like that like kind of anyone can hop into a group and attend. And I really feel like I want to find people that I feel like they're a good fit for this course, and that I want to make sure that I would rather keep the group small into like a really tight knit group where we're all in a similar space and like we're just able to be supportive of one another, than have people that are in too many different spaces to where it kind of becomes a drain. So just know that my heart is to keep it to kind of a select group that go through a bit of an application process. You're already on this call because I've identified that I think you all would be a great fit for the program, and I would love for all of you to do it if you feel a desire to do so. All right, so really my heart is to walk you through with like step-by-step coaching to give you the tools you need to record and release a single like a pro by the end of the 12 weeks. So there will be some bonus live sessions. I mentioned the guest expert on mixing mastering, having you come in for a behind the scenes video tour through my home studio setup, just to see how I was able to put something together here during the pandemic. We'll talk about how to get your songs onto CCLI, Song Select, Multitracks, worshiptune.com, etc. And then also a bonus of how to get your placements in TV, ad, and film. So the enrollment opens on October 25th, and I just decided, like, as scary as it is to take the leap, I just felt God say it's time to cast the net on the other side. And so I'm just casting the net October 25th to say, who wants to come in for this wild adventure for 12 weeks and take this like step-by-step process to learn to record and release your music like a pro. So I do want to give you some perks for being part of my research crew and being a part of this with me. I for anybody who books their first follow-up call with me, and that would be the way to kind of the next step for you if you're interested in the mentor program, would be just to book another call with me and say like, hey, I'm interested in exploring the mentorship. I would love to like talk to each of you individually about price point. Basically, like, I don't want the price to scare you off from considering taking the course. I want you to consider, is God asking you to cast your net on the other side? And if he is, I really believe that he'll help us figure out the financial piece that will work for you and for me. And so let's get on a call together. Let's make that happen for you. If all 13 of you guys wanted to do the mentor program, like, all 13 of you will. We're going to figure out a way for this to happen. But I just want to like give you some incentive maybe to hop in sooner than later and to not procrastinate and not get into self-doubt, and just to like take some action, throw the net, and start your journey. So for the first songwriter to book a follow-up call and enroll, I'm going to offer 50% off enrollment right off the bat. For anybody who books a follow-up call and enrolls in the next 7 days, 30% off, 14 days, 20% off, 21 days, 10% off, and so forth. And then enrollment is going to close on November 22nd. I want to get everything all kind of like tie the bow before Thanksgiving and the holidays, because I know, especially for those of you serving in church, it can be a really hectic time. So I want you to be able to like make that decision, take a deep breath, feel good about it, enjoy the holidays, stay healthy, all those things. But really, I want you to think of spending December to do some songwriting. Right? You're going to be taking some time to like write a whole bunch of songs so that we can choose a song in January to get you guys rolling and know what we're going to be recording. So I want to offer one last thing, which is a referral discount. And so if you were to recruit a friend to do this class with you, you and your friend would both receive 40% off of enrollment. And I'm doing this because obviously I've had the opportunity to meet each of you through these interview calls, but you have a whole circle of relationship that I don't have connection to. And so if you were able to introduce me to someone else that I don't have connection to, I would love to be able to honor you both with a discount to make it possible. And I think it could just be really fun for you to have someone, whether it's a spouse, a co-writer that you work with at church, someone on your worship team, I don't know, another worship leader in town, who might benefit for something like this. But I just feel like I want to make it doable for you, and then you'll also help me get the word out. So just a side note that the referred friend would have to complete an interview call with me so that I can make sure they're a good fit for the program. And if you happened to already enroll by that point at a lower discount rate than 40%, I will absolutely refund you the difference. So don't let that deter you from just getting in the door and getting in a good discount. If you happen to get a friend to book by November 22nd, I will honor that 40% and refund you any difference. Okay, so then we're going to kick off the program January 3rd through March 25th. That'll be our 12 weeks together. So The course won't start then, like I said, mostly because I just think December is not a good time. So it just kind of gives everyone a moment to breathe and all that jazz. But one last thing before you go, if you've stuck around this far, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to win 1 hour of free coaching with me. If you could help me spread the word, it would mean the world just to help get the word out about the program. So if you post on Facebook and or Instagram, a fun, creative, meaningful post about Hit Your Stride 12-week mentor program and why you might want to enroll, feel free to borrow wording from the website if you want any help like describing it, but just make sure you're tagging me, Sherilyn Music, and it'd be awesome if you could also tag the new Instagram for indie singer songwriters. And you can see that up on the slide. If you can tag both those accounts in your posts and stories, and make sure to mention that you and your friend could both get 40% off enrollment if you do the program together. And then out of those people who post, I'll choose my favorite post to win a free coaching call with me. So it'd be amazing if you could help me spread the word. Awesome. Well, this has been such a fun time. I really have had so much fun getting to know each of you guys. Like, I feel like I've gained friends. I love that now, whether I get to be a part of your journey, like formally or just informally, that we're like connected, and I will always be your biggest cheerleader, and we'll look forward to the music that God brings out of your hearts. But make sure that you take a moment this weekend or whenever you're listening to this webinar to do that little exercise and ask God this question. God, are you asking me to cast my net on the other side of the boat today? And if he is, then I encourage you to be brave and to trust him and to cast that net. And I hope that net includes hanging out with me and a whole bunch of other great songwriters for Hit Your Stride in the new year. So let me just do a quick prayer for you if you're watching, and just ask for the Lord's blessing on your life. So God, thank you so much for my sweet songwriting friends. Gosh, I feel like every single research call was so special, that each one of them, Lord, is so unique and has unique gifts, unique stories. God, you've given them a song in their heart to share with the world. And so I pray, Lord, that if anybody listening right now has a desire to walk through a mentor program like this, Lord, that you would provide what they need to make that possible, whether it's carving out enough time that they can actually focus on what really matters to them in songwriting and producing music to release, whether it's the finances, whether it's, getting support from their church or staff to carve out some time for this, whatever it might be, whatever roadblocks are in the way. I pray that you would remove those roadblocks. God, that you give us faith and courage to remember that you're the God who goes from empty nets to overflowing nets. God, you fill our empty nets. God, that you're the God who multiplies our loaves and fishes, and you're the God who parts the sea. And so I pray that you would increase our faith, and we look to you for all that we have need of. And we thank you for the gifts that you've given us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, I look forward to hearing from you. Holler at me even on Facebook if there's any questions or anything. And yeah, I look forward to chatting with y'all soon. Have an amazing rest of your day.
We will rise, we will rise. Like we do, like we do, like we do. We will rise in our time. You got me and I got you, and we will rise like we do. 'Cause it's our time to feel alive and see it through, and we will rise like we do, like we do. Whoa, whoa, oh, whoa, 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 oh, whoa, 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 like we do. They say you can make something out of nothing, but that never stopped us before.